Please welcome The Atlantic's Senior Vice President of Communications, Anna Bross.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here for this very timely conversation exploring the future of women's sports. 50 years after the passage of Title IX, women's sports are a huge business, boasting record-breaking viewership, sponsorship deals, and valuations. But challenges remain for equity with male counterparts in pay, media exposure, and access. We'll be exploring all of this and more today. Before we begin, please silence your cell phones, but keep them handy. If something you see is interesting to you, we encourage you to share it with your network, and please use the hashtag TAF25. Now, let's get started. Thank you so much.
Here to discuss investing in women's sports, please welcome Clara Wu Tsai, owner and governor of the New York Liberty, with Jemele Hill, contributing writer at The Atlantic.
Ooh, it's so bright up here. I can't see any of you all. Thank you all for joining us. I'm really excited about this conversation to have with you, Clara. And I have to say, I am very impressed that you are here, beyond, of course, talking to you about the amazing things you have done as owner of the New York Liberty, but also because your team has a series-deciding game tonight against the Phoenix Mercury. So let's start there. How are you feeling? Are you nervous? Are you?
I'm feeling great. I know that our team wants to win, and they're going to do their hardest to win this series and close out. So yes, I'm headed there right after this.
Yeah, because I was going to say, like, what time does the private jet leave?
Yeah.
But you all are the defending champions, and obviously there's a lot of pressure that comes with that. But I guess now that you probably have been able to maybe think about what that championship means, especially since the New York Liberty, one of the original franchises in the WNBA, how did it feel to enter this season as being the champions?
Well, first of all, the winning, the feeling on the court, the confetti, and then the parade was like nothing I've ever experienced, and nothing really that the players, even those who've won championships, had ever experienced. Just the way the city came out and really supported and really treated these players like rock stars. It was, it still brings me chills. So of course the feeling is you want to repeat that. And you want to do it, they want to do it for themselves, but they really wanted to do it for the fans, because the fans love this team. I don't know how many of you are from New York, maybe all of you, but in a very few short number of years, I think we really have become New York's team. And so the feeling is to want to run it back. And we had our largely intact. So, we started 9-0, but then injuries befell us, and we really haven't been fully healthy and playing as a team for a long time. And we started to be healthy toward the very end and started to play really well. But, they're such competitors, all of them, and they really want to win. So let's see what happens tonight. For those of you who've seen this whole entire first round playoffs has been incredibly competitive.
It has been
and there have been a lot of upsets. So.
Well, the championship was the culmination of a lot of things, but it wasn't just about what happened on the court, it's about what happened off the court. And to give you all in the audience a little context here is that, the Liberty, when you took over, they were playing at Westchester. They were kind of considered a little bit of a distressed franchise, and now the Liberty have a valuation of $450 million. And for women's sports, that is an incredible testament to the growth in this league in particular. So when you think about this incredible trajectory, and oh, by the way, your franchise seems to be on track for maybe being the first women's franchise that's valuated at $1 billion ever. But when you think about what you had to do to get to this moment, what are a couple of key things or key decisions you think that you made or you all made as a group that got you here?
Well, I don't know how many people know, do you about the genesis and sort of, the story of the New York Liberty. So I can take a few minutes if you want to talk about that. But, when we bought the team was put up for sale in 2017 by the previous owner, and he decided in 2018 to move the team from Madison Square Garden, where they had been playing, to Westchester County Center. And so by doing so, they lost a lot of their fan base, and of course, revenues and attendance declined. And at that time, in 2019, we had just completed purchase of the Brooklyn Nets and the Barclays Center. So the commissioner of the league asked us to take a look at it, and while there were definitely challenges, we saw some fundamentals that we liked, some good business fundamentals. And one was the best female basketball players in the world play in this league. We also knew that the tri-state area is the largest media market in the country, if not the world, and that New York was a real basketball town. And so we basically just took a leap of faith. Okay, and so we started to make investments. And I would say, one of the first things we did was move the team to Barclays Center, build a state-of-the-art locker room there, and start investing in the performance team. We really cared a lot about player health and recovery, and we really made investments there, as well as bringing on management talent, which is really important because in a few short years we were able to bring a lot of stars, including the top free agent in 2023, Breanna Stewart. But with Breanna, the argument, the way we were able to bring her is we had said to her that in order for the league to be strong, New York needed to have a strong presence, and that was a motivating factor for us, but also for someone like Stewie. So the investments, I would say, largely two different categories. One is players, so that's investing in facilities, and we also announced recently that we're building a standalone practice facility in Greenpoint. It's 70,000 square feet with a lot of private player spaces that they design themselves, community courts, et cetera. So I would say investments in facilities and then also in game day presentation. Including our mascot.
I was going to say that you have to mention Ellie. Yeah. They have, I think, across all sports, I think Ellie's the best mascot in professional sports, like hands down. And if you guys have never seen Ellie perform, I encourage you to go to YouTube and see Ellie. And so, yeah, that's part of that investment is giving fans an experience, correct?
Yeah, I think when people come to Barclays, we want them to have a great experience, and that doesn't just mean having the best basketball, but it also means having great entertainment. And in our case, because we are in Brooklyn, we want to offer entertainment that's very authentic to our borough. And Brooklyn is such an incredible mix of cultures and communities, and it's also about style and music and dancing, and so Ellie basically represents all of that. And she is, as you said, one of the only female mascots in any league, and she represents an empowered woman because she has two men chasing after her, holding her purse. And she hypes the crowd, she dances with the players, and she's really important to our success. And I think, when you think about building generational fandom, you really want your fans who might come there casually to watch basketball, but then, maybe just something about the entertainment, Ellie or our timeless torches, makes it a more memorable or emotional experience for them, which keeps them coming back.
I'm glad you brought up the new practice facility that you're building, which I believe is an $80 million facility. Mm-hmm. And what people need to understand is how big that is in this league. I interviewed Candace Parker a couple months ago, and Candace Parker, one of the greatest players to ever play in the WNBA, and she said something to me that really blew my mind. When she finished her career with the Las Vegas Aces, it was the first time in her career she had her own locker. Right. Now, this woman has won at every single level, high school, college, and she talked about the fact that that was one of the big reasons why in free agency she decided to go to Las Vegas, is because she finally wanted to get her own locker. So you all building this enormous and state-of-the-art practice facility, what does that signal about not only what's now a standard or creating a standard in the WNBA, but what is that signaling about the direction and where the league is headed?
Well, I think we are starting to set minimum standards. I think no expansion team, no team coming into this is not going to have a practice facility, and then that also expands into, arena size, right? You have to play an arena that seats at least 15,000 people because that's what is expected, and you need to have hospitality. But so I think, first of all, doing it really signals, a real commitment to these women as professional athletes. So I think it was really important, to have equal standards, right? So that if you're going to have practice facilities for your men's teams, you need to have an equivalent level of practice facility for your women's team. So that was important. But I think, what this means for the future and for the young women coming in is just they are now going to have things there's just a floor now, a minimum standard that everyone will meet.
The WNBA signed a record media rights deal that's north of $2 billion, which is the biggest deal obviously the league has ever had. Getting that kind of and securing that kind of media rights deal, how is this going to better set the WNBA up for the future and the growth of the league?
I think it's extremely important. I think media rights is by far the most important driver of growth and valuation for any professional sports league. And for us, it's really revenues like that are going to drive the ability to pay the players more. So it really, having that really sets up a firm financial foundation. And that revenue growth and just continued sustained revenue growth, that's really going to be the key to the longevity and future profitability of this league.
Last year, a long-running story for the WNBA was the arrival of Caitlin Clark, who, with her popularity, her fandom, really was able to take the WNBA to a different place. Mm-hmm. But we see this year, the league, after the growth last year, set another attendance and viewing record, and she spent much of this season injured. Mm-hmm. So what kind of message is that sending? The fact that, because so many people wanted to kind of run with this narrative that the league was Caitlin Clark and nothing else. Right. But you follow that up with another record-setting season. Mm-hmm. So what message do you think that sends to people? I
think it just means that the quality of play is really good. The product on the floor is excellent. And Caitlin brought a lot of new eyeballs, but those eyeballs stayed. And so we thank her for that, but also it's really great that all the stars who've played in this league a long time and the new stars, are really seeing that people appreciate the way they play. And by the way, I think that it's just going to get better because these stars like Paige, who's also Rookie of the Year, and Caitlin, they're, in a few years, they're not even at their prime. So just think about prime Caitlin or prime Paige, prime Juju when she gets here. The game's just going to get better and better, more physical, more competitive, and more exciting. So that's what I think we have to look forward to.
Sometimes unfairly, the investing in women's sports has always been kind of framed as charity, mm-hmm. that, we have to do this because it's the right thing to do. I think 2024 was the first year that women's sports generated over $1 billion in revenue. And 2025, it's expected to be even higher than it was in 2024. So what makes now an ideal time and a great time to invest in women's sports?
Well, I can speak in most detail about the WNBA. And I will say I am very optimistic about the future of the WNBA because not only is it the most mature professional women's sports league, it also has the best infrastructure, and it has a large fan base, a lot of viewership. No one's disputing that anymore, thankfully. And there's a really robust pipeline of stars from college, some who have national followings, right, who are going to sustain the audience growth. All the key revenue metrics have gone up consistently over the last 3 years. As you mentioned, there's a new media rights deal, which actually tripled the value of our media rights. And I still think there's upside in the media rights for women. Plus, we have expansion coming, 5 new teams coming on by 2030. So I think the WNBA is in a great place. But what makes it a really great investment opportunity is the fact that the revenues haven't caught up with the viewership. And so there's still a lot of room for monetization. So right now, the WNBA national broadcast viewership is 30% that of the NBA, but we're only 2% of the media value. And when the new media deal kicks in, we'll be valued at 4% of the media deal. So if the media rights and the sponsorships comes close to parity or closer to parity on a per viewer basis with the NBA, then revenues could very well double or triple, and of course, accordingly, valuations could double as well. So that's why I think it's very possible that we'll have $1 billion franchises, and there could very well be more than one.
We see also, when it comes to media, that there still remains a huge disparity between the amount of media coverage that women receive versus what men's sports typically receive, and this is the case when it comes to the WNBA and the NBA. What can be done to close that disparity? Because that's part of what increases the value of the league, is that people have to talk about it, as in people being the media, and write about it and cover it.
Well, first of all, I'd say I think it's improved a lot. So there can always be more, but I think the coverage of all aspects of our game has really, really improved. And, we're not really quite at a 24/7 news cycle like the NBA, but I think I think the New York Post added actually a beat reporter to cover. So, it's slowly changing. But I would say, and I also love the way, there are a lot more podcasts now. And, Candace Parker, the way she speaks truth, and she really tries to bring in coverage that is partly critique. I think, this, and I think that is going to bring more people to pay attention to what's going on in our league. And so I think that, yes, we could always use more, and we could always use better, more detailed, and really talk about the women's game like people talk about the men's game. And I think that's very important.
Part of what makes the WNBA a different kind of league is the spirit of outspokenness and activism that has been a part of the league since it started. And if you want to look in recent years about how during the Black Lives Matter movement, that they were very vocal about how they felt. I remember, your star, Breanna Stewart, when there was, this deportation of Muslims happening, that she was very outspoken and protesting, in fact. And so it's just been a part of the league just in general. But now that there's more money and more investment happening, is there, concern or how does this league balance staying true to who they've always been with the fact that usually more money means a little more compromising of things like that, because you have different investors that you want to attract and different investors that are in the league?
Well,
How do they maintain that
I
spirit?
think that's a good question for the players. Mm-hmm. I've always, and we've publicly said that we want to empower. Athlete voices is important. So we don't want to muzzle our players. We actually think that they have, the ability to say what they want to say. So I think it's really, it's really a question for them.
You mentioned this a few moments ago about the expansion, and I think there was some concern among the players that is this too fast? Should it be more focused on roster expansion as opposed to franchise expansion? Yeah. How did you feel about that? Is there any concern that maybe this is too much, too fast?
Well, I think for the league to grow, we have to expand our reach. We have to grow our fan base. And that's the best argument for expansion, because new teams ignite new fan bases. There'll be more conversation about it, more visibility, more people will be exposed to the league. And when that happens, it drives up media rights values and it drives up sponsorships. And that's ultimately, what continues to set the right foundation that we need to grow the league into the future. So I think that's ultimately, we need revenues and we need to continue to grow the fan base, and expansion teams is a great way to do that.
As this league looks and charts, the future, things are going obviously in a great direction right now, but what do you think from an ownership perspective can be done to make sure that you're seizing and furthering this moment that the WNBA is in? I think further investment in the players, in their health. I think further investment for game day presentation. And I have to say, like the marketing, it's really important, because if you think about your fans and like how long they stay with you, the lifetime value of a sports fan in terms of years is, the studies are like it's 30 years. Like a fan can be with you for 30 years. In a typical consumer products company, that lifetime value in years is more like 5 years, maybe 10 if you're lucky. So I think investing in your marketing and in things that create that emotional relationship with your fans is really important. So I think more of that will happen. I think we need continued investment. We need more people to just tune into games. And for any sponsors out there, I think if people really want to help the league, it's watching the games and buying suites and becoming sponsors and really paying for the value of what women's sports actually brings. Because I don't think that it's, as I was saying before, there still is that discrepancy between the value of, the revenues and the viewership. So I think that there's room to grow, and people need to start, the revenues need to start reflecting the ratings. You mentioned player health and the investment in that, and I don't know if it's one of those things where it's just sort of my imagination. I don't know how you feel about it as an owner, but it did feel like there was a lot of significant injuries this year. You mentioned, Brianna, like she is one of the big stars right now dealing with an injury. As a league, thinking about what the WNBA schedule is, that basically starts in May, essentially. And the players were very vocal about some of their concerns about the travel and the truncated games. Where do you stand with that in terms of validating their concerns?
Yeah, well, I think this year we added 4 games. So we went from 40 games to 44 in the same footprint in the same amount of time. And I think it's pretty clear that, some teams were playing, 9 games in 18 days, and that's like 2 games a week or 2.5 games a week. And if there is travel and if there are back-to-backs, that really takes a toll on the players. So there needs to find a way, if we do expand to more games, we do have to look at ways to expand the start and stop and expand the footprint.
As we're kind of coming to a close here, and you think about, where you all are headed as a franchise, like, financially, even with the product that you're putting, on the floor. If you think about 1 or 2 things that you think will help you get to being that billion-dollar, franchise, what sort of comes to mind as you chart out the future and feel like this is the area of growth we need to make sure that we do?
I think we just need to keep the trajectory that we've been seeing in all the key areas, the attendance, the viewership, sponsorships, ticketing. But I think a major growth area for the league, which will also reflect back and benefit all the teams, is globalization of the game. So I think that expanding our fan base beyond U.S. borders is definitely going to happen. I think around 20% of the players in the league right now are foreign-born, and I'm sure that number is going to grow in the coming years. And so, what that means is more global games, and it means more opportunities for merchandise sales and global media rights deals from the league perspective. And from the player perspective, they'll do more, for example, Asia tours. They'll go to China or they'll go to Europe, and they'll have the opportunity for international brand deals. So I think, the way that the NBA has become a global game, the W is headed in that direction as well.
But in some ways, you think the W is in a better position because so many players have spent time, so many big stars have spent time playing overseas.
That's true too.
Yeah.
And that's why it's not just the foreign players, that are going to drive the fandom, but it's also the Americans, but a lot of people want to, again, we were saying before, this league has the best basketball players in the world. If you love women's basketball and you live in any one of the other countries in the world, you want to watch the WNBA.
All right. Well, Clara, thank you so much for joining us. More importantly, good luck tonight.
Thank you.
Everybody here, root obviously for the Liberty, because I think those of us who are women's basketball fans, as I've been for pretty much the majority of my life, I think part of the narrative that I love to see with champions is them getting a real chance to defend it. And so, hopefully I'm not annoying any Mercury fans, but it would be great if the Liberty would be able to defend their title. So good luck tonight.
You. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, guys.
For a conversation about the state of women's sports, please welcome Sarah Spain, journalist, podcast host, and author, and Carrie Champion, broadcast journalist and host, with The Atlantic's Jemele Hill.
Sorry, guys, this isn't the Oscars where I do a quick change and come back in a totally different outfit. It is what it is, and I'm going to preemptively apologize for all the kikiing that's probably going to happen on the stage.
Just three best friends.
We're all friends. We all work together at ESPN, and we obviously all are very invested in the growth of women's sports. So I want to ask you both to answer this. How would you describe right now where we are, or what moment we're in when it comes to women's sports? How would you describe it? I'll start with you, Sarah.
Well, my optimistic hope is that we are early in what will be an even greater peak, that we're just going up. There's such a lack of investment, media attention, political support, et cetera, for women for such a long time, that this explosion is the result of tons of work that came, and also a lot of societal shifts in terms of expectations around women, the lanes in which they belong, the things they should be allowed to do, feminine and masculine presentation, sexuality, all these things that have allowed for this moment to happen. And that was almost in spite of people pushing so hard against it succeeding, that now that we're actually seeing massive investments from the likes of Clara Wu Tsai and everybody else, we've got this opportunity for it to get way, 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 way bigger than it already is. But there are potentially might be challenges. We certainly can't rest on this as a rocket ship with an inevitable future growth.
I think that's great. Sarah, first and foremost, I just want to say, just with the respect, you think of Claire, you think of Sarah, I think of Jemele. I think some of the women here who are standing before you and talking with you very casually are a part of this rebirth, if you will, of women's sports in terms of making it popular for the masses. Where I think we are today there has been this conversation about taking certain players, i.e. Caitlin Clark, and weaponizing who they are to further another agenda. I am of the belief, and I know it sounds controversial, I am of the belief that a little bit of drama brings things to the forefront and allows people to pay attention to it in a way they haven't paid attention to it before. And that for me was Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. And I think these women were a beautiful moment, albeit uncomfortable, albeit, we're polarizing, but a beautiful moment for you to see past whatever your beliefs are and understand that this thing called women's sports is a beautiful thing. And it's been here for everyone. And we've wanted the audience, we've wanted people to pay attention. So where we are today, I believe, is a moment of opportunity. A moment of, take a look at how great this is. Oh, actually the sport is great. I'm old enough to remember when we talked about women's sports and we only talked about the top 10 prettiest women. Mm-hmm. It wasn't about their ability or what they did that stood out, it was about what they looked like. And now today we're talking about, in real terms, we're identifying players, we're talking about what they're good at, we are excited about what they can do, even on the collegiate level, and in women's sports across the board, because it gives you a different focus. It's become in vogue for so many people, but it's here to stay, and it's always been here. Mm-hmm. The product has always been here. To Sarah's point, there's a lot more work to do, and I think that comes with the conversation of investing. The investment is what we need, a comprehensive investment.
And I don't know if we'll get into it, but I just want to say quickly, in case we don't, what's been frustrating for me is we had this tiny window between, if you searched women's sports, you would get top 10 hottest, either athletes or sportscasters.
Sure.
And then there's this beautiful window of actually getting women's sports, and now it immediately goes to trans women's in sports. We had a window where we actually talked about what we wanted to watch, and the games, and the X's and O's, and the athletes, and the stories, and now we're right back to it being weaponized to be an argument for something unrelated to the product, which is so frustrating to me. But anyway, carry on.
No. Listen, I'm here for a good, educated rant and read. Carrie, everything you said was great, but I just feel like I have to call attention to the fact you got fur on your shoes, and that is incredible.
She does.
I just came on a Friday with some fur on my shoes.
You sure did.
Listen,
and I'm like, if those come up missing, I did it.
Listen, this is an ode to women's sports. Women were not allowed to have a tunnel where they could be models. Women were not allowed to bring their femininity to the workplace. For all the women in here, how many people feel like they still, and probably perhaps in the past, had to wear a work suit?
Right.
And you wanted to be different.
They were either asked to be more feminine
Correct.
in a sexualized way.
Correct.
Or
the
they
other
were told
way.
because they were feminine, they couldn't possibly be serious about sport. And now it's just do your thing, and we want you to be authentically yourself and whatever feels right. And that is another aspect of the growth, because it's so much more accessible to so many more people when we have villains and heroes and funny and serious and mask and femme and gay and straight.
Which is why I'm wearing fur on my shoes, to your original
What a
point.
statement.
To her original point.
It's not real if PETA's here.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
It's not real.
No animals were harmed
They're
in the
faux
making
fur.
of those.
Okay.
I don't know if they are, but let's just
wait a second. They are not, and we told you we would go on a rant because we're all really good friends.
We told you it'd be some kiki.
It's gonna go off the rails.
Yeah, very, very quickly. But Sarah, you brought up something like, really important in talking about the barriers that, despite all the growth, despite the fact that I would like to think it has changed, the perception has changed that women's sports, investing in it is charity, right? I think that has changed because we're seeing a lot of people make a lot of money in women's sports right now, and the barrier of entry is different, and I think that's a big reason why they're making a lot of money. But with that being said, we can't get caught up in trying to pat ourselves on the back a little too hard. So what do you see as still like the major challenges that are still ever present as we try to take advantage of this moment that's unfolding in women's sports?
There are a lot of them. I think I'll start with where you started, which was some of the barriers that existed before. I think there are too many people who still aren't educated on what stood in the way of women's sports, and so they blamed the product. The belief was that the product wasn't good enough, people weren't interested, the quality wasn't there, the stars weren't there, the stories weren't there. And when you really dive into everything from intentional prevention of play, there was a 50-year ban on women's professional soccer in England that was intentional. There was a women's game that outdrew a men's game way back when, and it wasn't until 1970 that they actually allowed women to play professionally again. Do you think that had a big impact on participation, interest, sales, sponsorship, everything else? And now we're seeing it blow up across the pond because they're finally building off of enough timeline for them to get popular and get interesting there. In the 1990s, the head of the International Ski Jumping Federation was still saying women shouldn't ski jump because their uteruses would fall out. There is a constant stream of.
Is that
that's
true?
funny, but it's sad.
I'm like, wait, is that not
I've never seen a
true?
uterus fall out once, and I've been at this a long time. And if there was, wouldn't there be some sort of market for uteruses? If you fall out, you
is
need
it
a
uteruses? Or
Is it uteruses or just
uteri?
I think it's uteri.
Either way.
It's uteri.
Either way, they're not falling out of the sky.
They've
Right?
been staying put during ski jumping, marathon running, horseback riding, all the different things we were told we weren't allowed to do. And that was until the 90s that guy was saying that. So this pseudoscience.
I knew it was a man. I knew it was a man.
Of course it was. The misinformation, the intentional holding back, even something as simple as the lack of taxpayer funds for stadiums. There's no cultural capital to being on the side of women's sport for such a long time. In fact, it was almost better to make fun of it. There were massive talking heads at ESPN who, when the WNBA arrived, immediately poisoned the well and made it a punchline. There were late night talk show hosts doing the same. So it has been pushing back constantly against all of that, and including lack of media coverage, investment, all that. So those barriers still exist in the sense of people who are on the outside who think Caitlin Clark is the only reason things are different now. I don't blame them for not being fully educated on it, but we need more people to understand the full story so they understand what we still need to keep doing to continue the growth. And then I would say there are two other big barriers that I'm most worried about. One is the change in social back, a regression from some of the ideas and things that have allowed women to excel in spaces that they previously were denied, whether that's us working as sports reporters or women athletes being embraced for being tough and competitive and fiery, and the things we say we like in sports until women do it, and then we make up weird stories about what it is and how it's not sports anymore. And then the other one I think is long-term effects of House versus NCAA, declining emphasis on Title IX, and actual political pressure to protect women's sports that will actually completely dismantle the things that are helping and have helped it grow. And that to me is something I'm really afraid of, because it seems very incongruous that the rest of society is like, trad wives, support your man, and over here women's sports are like thriving. I'm like, at some point, I mean, they already are coming for it, but more so I worry.
Yeah, Carrie, to pick up where Sarah was going with this, when you think about the media coverage of women's sports, you and I have talked about this so much, you know, just in our little kiki sessions, about how all of a sudden now you have a lot of people chiming in about women's sports and setting narratives who never covered women's sports or did very little coverage.
And they're still not watching.
And they're still not watching. They're just sort of picking and choosing some dramatic narrative they've made up. But how do you think that's impacting how people are looking at sports? Because we do have new eyeballs, that's good, and new media people chiming in, but is it really good?
Yeah, I think it's great. I think all attention is good attention. I really do. I know that it sounds, I want to be pious and high above all of it, but I'm not. I think what you're talking about is the narrative that's still associated with women's sports. I think two problems are in terms of barriers, your original question. One would definitely be the idea that we can't find one woman and call her exceptional. Like the way the media covers sports, it's almost because we are talking about this specific gender, women, and I'm talking about myself, we feel like we can't give that same critique. We can't talk about it the way in which we talk about men's sports. I'm not comparing the two, that's the other problem. But I feel like one of the barriers is that if we don't treat them first as athletes, then as women, we find ourselves making all of these rules and all of these different types of storylines that make people feel comfortable. One storyline that I don't like is jealousy. Okay, maybe I don't like her. Maybe I am jealous of her, but that also exists in men's sports. And to your point, Jemele, the voices that have never watched the sport, they highlight it because it's such low-hanging fruit. It's such low-hanging fruit to talk about how women are catty or they don't like each other or who's better. It's just not really what the story is about. And you see that in men's sports as well. But this, for some reasons, if you take a voice like a Charles Barkley or a Stephen A. Smith, or I can name tons of men who have huge platforms and they talk about a sport that I can guarantee they're not familiar with. They get the headlines, they run the headlines, and that's unfortunate because that then controls the narrative. So when you tune into the sport to watch it, you're looking for those things. Also, the problem is this comparison. When a woman talks about, or when I talk about, or when Sarah or Jemele will talk about what needs to be equal pay, I'm not asking for the women to have a $200 million contract. We're just talking about comparatively, like what they deserve. Let's look at the numbers, what can be given. And the money can be there, right? Because they just recently got private flying, right? They can fly privately. We're seeing different outlets, like an Unrivaled, if you will, come together and give women ownership. What I like to call the sweat equity, because this league was built on the backs of women who didn't make any money. You have to understand, if you are a woman and you want to go into a professional sport, it's for the love. It's not for the fame. It's not for the money. It's not for the attention. It's for the love. As of late, we're getting all of the latter. Now the money's coming and the attention is coming. But to me, that's one of the stories that is missed. I would like to talk to someone who can say, I do this because I love it. Not because there's attention, not because I expect money, not because I'm going to be famous, but because I love it.
I agree, except for we've been asking women to do that forever, and it's bullshit.
What do you mean?
You can do it for the love, and you can do it, but you should also get all the other things that come with that.
But I'm talking about the people who laid the ground for the foundation
totally.
before. 1997, these women weren't doing it for money. They were doing it because they loved the sport.
And I think
now they deserve their money, but we have these people who are covering the sport and not telling the entire story, to your point.
Agreed. And I would say, to your point about all publicity is good publicity, the one thing I will say about women's sports that makes it really tricky is in men's sports, when disinformation and misinformation is spread, people know where to go to get the real story, and there are enough loud people yelling that something isn't true to offset the NBA Centel, which is a fake account that loves to post things and trick people into thinking it's real, the fake infographics with quotes, the stories that are on AI-generated sites.
But it's everywhere. I see Jemele always reposting a random story saying, this isn't true, I didn't say that.
No,
because they definitely use the fruit of like women of color.
Agreed, but what I would say is, my point is that in men's sports, when that happens, enough people can say that's not a source, or that's not real, or we all watched the video, he never said that in that presser. There is not a centralized space similar to a sports center in women's sports. Good Game with Sarah Spain would like to be that space. You're welcome to subscribe and listen every day.
Don't worry, I was going to let you get that plug in. Trust me.
But that's honestly one of the reasons we try to do the news every single day, because there isn't anywhere every single day that updates and is going to be vetted and sourced and fact-checked and true, and all the names are said correctly in women's sports. There isn't that attention to detail. So when you say Angel Reese said X, there are millions of people who will never know she never said that, because there is nowhere to go to find out that she didn't. There isn't a trusted resource that everyone knows is going to be the Adam Schefter, right? And there are plenty of voices that are trusted, but they aren't centralized in a way on ESPN every single day.
And I don't even know if people want that in today's society.
They
that's
might
what
not,
we have
but
to
that's
come,
what's frustrating for women's sports.
But we have to come to grips with that and find a way to still push through, because I don't think across the board, we're talking sports, politics, or anything, fact-checking is a thing of the past, and we have to be okay with that, and we have to also condition our brains to know that when we are reading something that feels a little unbelievable, we do another dive. We can't just read a headline and say that's what it is, and that's what I'm asking. That's what I hope that what we are doing with this platform today is saying you're going to have to dig a little bit deeper, because you can't really trust anything anymore.
I agree. It's just a little more dangerous for women athletes because of
They're already
stalkers,
targeted.
because of threats, because of things like that.
Carrie, I want to ask you about women's tennis, because you covered tennis for
a very long time.
I'm
only 20. That's crazy.
Yeah, I know, because you started when you were 3.
I started when I was 3.
So
we want to know the deal you made. We don't want to make it.
And you know, for a long time, I think women's tennis, they were able to be at least positioned as being the sport that was ahead of everybody else, ahead of other women's sports, because of the fights for pay equity, and they got it, right? at the slams at least. Anyway, I know they still have some work to be done at some of the other tournaments. So with that being said, though, even with that fight, there still seems to be some very troubling gender stereotypes in women's tennis. I would love for you to elaborate on that and some of the trouble spots that you're seeing in that sports in particular.
Shout out to Tennis Channel, my first sports job. I covered tennis for years, and I got to go to a few of the slams. To Jemele's point, there are a lot of troubling narratives, and if I'm honest with you, they still exist. I just finished a podcast about Martina Navratilova and Chris Evert. It's called Rivals, right? If you know anything about tennis, that rivalry is, to me, one of the greatest rivalries of all time in terms of sports, period. Not men's, not women's. These women played each other so many times over the years. And what you had on one side was a woman who was, she ultimately defected, which was Martina Navratilova. And then you had this homemade, beautiful, pigtail, great girl, blonde hair, and Chris Evert. And I think that story of good versus evil still exists for women in tennis, women period, but they always have to have a good and a bad cop. You just always have to have it. Now, what's happening now in tennis is that they're creating, the good and the bad cop usually exists with how you were raised, who your coaches are, what you look like on the outside, things in which you cannot control. You all saw the Taylor Townsend incident, right? And here's Taylor handling it with the best of her ability, knowing that if she were to ever say anything on that level, she would be considered unacceptable in a sport that is supposed to be polite. And I think women are trying to, at least in tennis, they are trying their best to say that we are all one. They really are working on that. The players are working on that. They're trying to show that they are friends. We had, Coco and Arena. They were hanging out. Her and Sabalenka are best friends, and they had to do a TikTok video to show that they liked each other. Name a time when you think you'd see Michael Jordan do a TikTok video with whom? Isaiah Thomas, maybe? One of your people?
Now you know that ain't happening.
With Charles Barkley, with Magic Johnson, and I think it's not just with tennis, but it's across the board. I'm going to go back to my original thought. These women need to just be athletes first before they have to be. Society has decided that they need to be friends if they're women, that they have to like each other. I'm okay with them not liking each other, and I encourage you all to do the same, because that is not what sports is.
Yeah.
They don't have to be best friends, and you do not have to label me because I don't like someone, because at my heart I'm a competitor because I'm an athlete. And I want to win, and I want to be the best, and I want to be better than anyone.
Right.
And nothing is wrong with that, because that's the idea of sports. If I've lost the
end of my show,
narrative.
we literally, it's called Good Game, like the end of a game handshake line, but we say good game someone, F you someone. We end every show, good game, F you. Because there was always someone on the other team that we did not want to say good game to, and we did not want to give them a high five, and we shouldn't be expected to. We're only so good at good sports.
The net. I don't want to be your friend, and that's
within
okay.
Within reason,
like,
of course. But we police women.
Names, but you just it's okay to have a very uncomfortable relationship with a competitor.
Right.
And my hope is, with the work that we're doing and talking about the long ways that we have to go, tennis is one of the big ones. Yes, they pay them well. The women get paid very well. The men complain about it all the time. They're like, well, we do 5 sets versus their 3 sets during a final. And it's just like, come on, relax. Everybody relax. They deserve what because the women, for so long, Serena Williams and her sister Venus were the draw in American tennis. They brought the numbers. They brought the people to sit there, and then we followed the rest. I love a Roger Federer. I love a Novak Djokovic. I love a Rafa Nadal. But like, there are women who were holding this sport together here in the stateside, and they weren't getting the love and the respect that they deserved. It was because when they were too competitive, it made people uncomfortable, and that's the transition that I hope that we can start to look at differently.
So now that we know how profitable that women's sports can be, we know like a DNA, like for example in the WNBA, part of the DNA of the WNBA is their outspokenness. Like the fact that, during the height of the Black Lives Matter movement, they were on the front lines. I mean, they changed history because they got a senator upended from her position in Kelly Loeffler, and they got behind Reverend Raphael Warnock, which ultimately led to Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson becoming the first Black woman in the Supreme Court. So we know how often that they have been able to speak out or have chosen that responsibility. But now that there's more money, Usually when there's more money, we've seen this happen in sports a lot, that's when everybody gets quiet because them checks start coming and nobody wants to compromise the check. So, I mean, both of you, and I'll start with you, Carrie, like, what is your expectation now that there is more money? Do you think the players can maintain that spirit of outspokenness and activism that has always been a part of their DNA?
Oh, God, I hope I don't say anything uncomfortable, but maybe. During that time...
Or should we even expect that, you know?
During that time, you're like talking to 2020 during the Black Lives Matter, the whole movement, 2020, 21. I felt like for so long the women were so quiet, but they were quietly activating because there was I'm going to do it, I'm going to wear my shirts, and then they got suspended. You know, they got in trouble and fined by certain people in the league back then, the commissioner. I do believe that there's more money, they know their worth. And once you know your worth and you know your value, you require more. So this is why I think that, especially with the onslaught of new athletes that are coming from college who are making all that NIL money, name, image, and likeness, they're millionaires before they even get to the league. They make more money as college students than they do when they start playing specifically in the W. Some of them,
like Angel Reese,
not all of them, but some of them. There's an attitude that comes with that when you know your value or you understand what your value is. I think of stud buds. I think of just a group of people who are starting to understand their value. I don't expect them to be activists. I don't expect them to speak out on things they're not comfortable to speak on, because that's just not fair. I do believe you have to grow into that. And I think what we're going to see is that as the dust settles and these women start to get their money, whether it be marketing and or from the league and or different entities, they're going to understand their direction. And I do expect to see some people stand out in different ways. It's just like as in life. But now that the money is there, I don't think that automatically that's going to happen, because there's a conditioning that still happens with women's sports in association with it.
Yeah, I think it's so much a part of women's sports across NWHL, PWHL, WNBA. Like, I mean, anywhere you look where women are inherently political. Existing in a woman's body is a political statement, whether you like it or not, and there is so much intersectionality that cannot be ignored, whether that's drafting someone to a state where they don't have autonomy over their medical decisions. Can we allow for states to force for leagues to tell someone, go play somewhere where if something medical happens, you don't get to decide? I think that's going to be massive to look at. The NWSL abolished the draft. They're the first major professional league in the States to no longer have a draft and to allow more free agency because they needed to fit in with the global game. But how does that impact how others see their decision making? I think there is a progression of criticism that you spoke to earlier that I think will start to happen more often when these women who have previously been coming from an underserved position are now successful, money-making, and we are going to demand of them the same things we demand of men. And I'm going to name two people. Venus and Serena Williams have a new show on X. That is a choice right now. Of all the places you want to put yourself and have a platform, you're choosing X in the year 2025 right now in the current. I'm going to criticize that, and deservedly so. You want to get that bag, I can say that's not the place to get it. I think there are going to be women who stand out for still being willing to speak out. I think we just saw NWSLPA and WNBAPA speak out against the SCORE Act, which is a Republican-led attempt to pass a bill that will vastly, vastly endanger the future of women's sports at the collegiate level and cut into all the gains that we've made with Title IX and otherwise. They're doing that in a really smart way. They're doing that in a thoughtful and intentional way, and I think that's what's going to be required under the current regime. You can't willy-nilly make statements without fear of repercussion. We've seen that across so many different spaces, and the same will be true in women's sports, and I worry very much, bless you, I worry very much about what's going to happen. We saw an absolutely absurd op-ed in the Wall Street Journal about how Congress should take under the concept of Caitlin Clark being a civil rights offense being committed against her for the physical play she receives during games. This is a real op-ed that exists, y'all.
So
that
sad.
is a trigger to the highest levels to say, we want you to regulate the WNBA. This is a place of successful, thriving Black women and queer women. Get your hand in there and mess with it, and here's how we're going to give you a chance to do that. We're running out of time. I could go on forever, but yeah, I mean, there's going to be some real intentionality required to keep pushing the things that women's sports stand for in the very natural intersections without it being just step done.
The Venus Williams and the Serena Williams choice to be on X, I'm not going to criticize that yet, because why not go to the platform where you're not wanted to show that you belong? Why not go to the platform and say, I can say what I want to say, and I dare you to push? And that's what we haven't seen.
know.
They've
Serena
only had,
and
this is why
Alexa
we're going to kiki.
intersection
This should be the
really-
whole story. But they just started. Like, I think we can't criticize that until we see.
Why say what you want to say on that place where you make that person money and where you legitimize something?
I don't know. I can't necessarily say they don't know what they're doing.
I'm not saying they don't know. I'm saying what if they do know and they don't care?
No. I don't think that at all. I know Serena well. I don't think that at all. I know Venus well. I don't think that at all. Venus has led pay equity for tennis. I don't think that they would go on a platform just to make some money, just to put in their pockets when they already are fat. I just say, yes, criticize all you want, but just wait and see. There's still time. There's still time.
I will wait and see.
There's still time.
I will wait and see.
There's still time.
Well, this is the beauty of, I think, the beauty of where we are right now in women's sports, and particularly in the media, with these two bright and talented women, young women. Let me just say that, young women.
Yes.
Young women.
Forever young.
Right.
I just turned 20. Naked Sports, Carrie
I was just about to give you the plug and say, make sure that you follow Carrie's podcast, Naked Sports. Follow Good Game, and also congratulations. I get to say this publicly.
Yes.
Your role at iHeart, will you be overseeing women's
content director of iHeart Women's Sports Network.
Women's Sports Network. Yes.
We have shows for all the sports.
Correct. And so, and that is also a part of this growth in media. Like Sarah said, is that we need to get to a point and graduate to where women's sports fans can have a dedicated outlet they can go to every single day to find out about what's happening in women's sports, because there's a lot happening all the time. So it's certainly not for lack of content.
Jump on in, the water's warm.
Congratulations to you, Jemele. Thanks for having us. You're amazing.
Thanks, Jemele.
Thank the Atlantic, but that's okay.
Thank you, Atlantic,
but of
for
course, I
having
love
us.
talking to you ladies anytime. So anyway, thank you all for engaging us and for listening to us, and you can listen to more of them anytime you want. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Friend.